I'm sure you've all been enjoying this fabulous Indian summer we've had over the last couple of weeks. And I have to say, the evenings have been absolutely amazing as well. Saturday night was one of the most stunning observing nights I've had in a long, long time. The moon's out of the way at the moment, the stars were spectacular, and the Milky Way was just from one horizon right to the other. It was really, really nice. But the good news with all this sun around, after a very long period of blank sun, we have two sunspots. Now, Peter has just been saying to me that he doesn't think those numbers are correct, so please don't quote those numbers. But after having a long period when there was no sunspots at all, two come round the corner right away. So that's good news for Peter, certainly. Now this particular solar minimum, as it's called, whenever there aren't a lot of spots on the sun, is pretty unusual. And you can see there, a typical solar minimum perhaps lasts for 485 days, where there's a period of largely inactivity. But the current period has run on since 2004 for 723 days. And that, as I say, is quite unusual. And for us it meant that there wasn't any sunspots. So whenever we were going out and looking around the place and trying to show people our hydrogen alpha telescopes and beautiful views of the sun, just like this, unfortunately the sun had nothing very much to show us. But there was still activity, and even around the rim here you can see the prominence is sticking out, and through the summer somebody spotted this very rapid transition from the sun, the matter flying up, and that's in real time, so that's quite a... another thing that's been happening recently is we've had a nice spate of aurora. Unfortunately I haven't seen any from Ireland, but just if there's any visitors you can see the aurora, and you can see it very well from Ireland, you can see it very well from Northern Ireland. Over the last couple of nights there's been huge auroras in Canada, parts of Iceland, parts of Scandinavia. And it just seems to be, and I'm sure there's a very good reason for it, I know they're researching it at the moment, that the auroras are particularly strong and particularly frequent around the equinoxes. So this is a good time to have a look out, and with any luck with the upsurge in activity on the sun, we might see some nice aurora borealis or northern lights. One thing we did see a lot of during the summer, again, people are trying to tie this back to solar activity, was the noctilucent clouds. And through most of June and July we had superb displays almost every night for a while. We had beautiful displays, and here John McCall, who lives down in Maghaberry, he took a whole series of these photographs, very strong and beautiful. You can see the sort of wispy, almost neon light effect that the noctilucent clouds produce. Terry mentioned earlier on the ISS is visible now. There's so many modules on it, so many solar panels up there, you can actually see it during daylight. And here it is down in here. You can just about pick it out maybe against the lights in the background there. But yes, it's visible during the day. And if you have a look at night, if you're quick enough to catch it with your telescope, you can maybe you can take a photograph, something like that. Now, that photograph was taken with a 10-inch telescope from a chap in the Netherlands, but you can see the amazing amount of detail that he's actually recorded. And here was the recent Japanese HTV1 module, which over the last week or so was rendezvousing with the ISS. And this guy again took a photograph. You can see here was part of a Cosmos rocket which just happened to pass through the frame at the same time. So the ISS is pretty spectacular at the moment. The sky itself, as I mentioned over the last couple of nights, has been absolutely amazing. And at this time of the year, the Milky Way, this sort of, some people think it looks a bit like clouds. They've never seen the Milky Way. Some people just don't know what it is. But actually, if you get a really dark, nice sight, you can see the Milky Way stretching from one horizon right up over your head, right down to the other horizon. And this is a view if you look north. We know it's north because one of our most familiar friends in the sky is the Plough, part of a constellation known as Ursa Major. And at the moment, Ursa Major is easy to find because of the 7 very distinctive stars, but also because it's got 2 quite bright stars. And these 2 stars, Arcturus and Capella, are 2 of the brighter stars to pop into view as the sky starts to get dark. Arcturus is part of constellation Bootes, and it's in the sort of the northwestern part of the sky, and Capella's round into the northeastern part of the sky. But 2 very bright stars, and if you look in between them, you can see the Plough. Very easy to see, but quite low down at this time of year in the evening sky. And of course, these 2 stars here, the pointers, they point to Polaris, so we know we're looking towards the north part of the sky, the North Pole. At the other side of the pole, we have Cassiopeia, and again, it's primarily for beginners, but whenever Ursa Major is down low in the horizon, you know that Cassiopeia is going to be up quite high. And next door to it, one of the most famous objects in the sky, the Andromeda Galaxy. Okay, if you move into the southern part of the sky, hugely interesting sky at this time of year. Again, you see the Milky Way sweeping from overhead. brighter stars, the first ones that pop out would be the stars, believe it or not, of the summer triangle. The summer stars are still well in view at the moment. Almost overhead we have the brilliant star Deneb in Cygnus of Swan, right next door to Vega in the constellation of Lara, and down, but still quite high in the sky, is the star Altair, and you can see here the triangle shape that denotes the summer triangle arrangement. A lot of people have been saying to me, Andy, what is the very, very bright star-like object quite low down in the southern part of the sky? And that is, of course, planet Jupiter, which if you can get to a telescope looks pretty superb, and we'll come back to Jupiter in a moment or two. But Jupiter, low down, southern part of the sky, for me in Bangor, it's down in the Glare, so it's not a particularly spectacular object, not as spectacular as it should be, but nevertheless it's well worth a look. I mentioned the M31, or the Andromeda Galaxy, earlier on. Very easy to find, and this is just a little trick to try and help you find it. If you look at the W of Cassiopeia, use this bit here as an arrow, and you follow that line down, and there it is. It's sort of midway between a line of fairly bright stars and Cassiopeia. The other way, the way that most of us use, is to count 1, 2, 3, and up 2.5, and you come to M31. And through binoculars, even with some people's naked eye, you can see a nice smudge. And through the telescope, it might look something like that. That's a photograph which I took last year. Not a particularly good photograph. It wasn't a very good night, but you can see the dark dust lanes in it, and even in a good telescope on a dark night, you should be able to pick those out, along with the satellite galaxies here in the same image. So the Andromeda Galaxy is certainly the star of the show at this time of year. Coming back to the planets, and the bright planets, the brightest of the planets here, Jupiter, you can see at the moment we're very well positioned to see some of the behaviour of the moons. Now any night you go out you would expect to see the 4 Galilean moons, and this is of course International Year of Astronomy, and those Galilean moons were named in honour of Galileo, who 400 years ago pointed his telescope to Galileo and saw them. And there's a few spectacular events are happening around those moons, or have happened. For example, there was a night when there weren't any moons. They were either in front of the planet or behind it. Now, unfortunately, it was cloudy for me that night. I didn't see it. But there's all sorts of mutual interactions you can watch as well. And here's a nice little occultation that somebody managed to capture from Australia. So Jupiter and its moons, certainly well worth a look. Another planet which I have to say is a lot less spectacular, but it's fairly easy to find at the moment as well. You start off with the square of Pegasus, which was at the end of the arm of stars that had the Andromeda Galaxy in it. I meant to point it out. But the square of Pegasus has a little group below it called Pisces, a little constellation. Pretty hard to find now. I find it easier to locate the individual stars with binoculars. But once you're there, the circlet of stars, this little ring of stars, is easy to find, and you can drop down, and Uranus is actually visible through a pair of binoculars. We would say it's about 5.5, mine would say 5.5. But the way you can find it is you can find this little triangle in this little row of 3. Uranus is the one at the end of that row. So it's very easy to find Uranus if you've never seen it before. Uranus's twin big sister, if you want to put it like that. Again, pretty hard to find for most people, but at the minute it's very well aspected because you've got a good signpost. You know it's quite close to Jupiter. So if you can find Jupiter at the moment is moving through Capricornus, and there, these two stars are relatively easy to pick out with binoculars. And if you find again the triangle, Neptune would be the top star in this unequal triangle of stars. Pretty easy to find again, and through a telescope it looks like a little bluish star. A lot of talk about these photographs, and I noticed Derek has one in tonight. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, or the LRO, managed to take some very interesting photographs of the moon's surface. In fact, very, very high resolution photographs. And in this one here, you can see here is the Apollo 11 landing site, and here is the descent stage of the lunar module. And just to put it into context for you, most of you are probably too young and you don't remember what happened, but this bottom bit here, it's about 3 meters high, it was the bit that stayed on the moon, and this bit here, the astronauts got back into, and it blasted off back into rendezvous with the command module overhead. So that's what we're looking at there, this wee thing down in here, and here you can see the shadow. Now that's pretty good for Apollo 11. Apollo 14 is even more detailed because you can see this sort of smudgy footpath here that the Apollo astronauts use back and forward from the descent stage right through to, here's a scientific instrument here. Now, I think that's probably conclusive evidence for most of us, but of course there's always going to be somebody that says, you know, what about Photoshop? Did it not do the job? But anyway, I don't believe that at all. Okay, just to finish, we didn't have a brilliant summer, but this was a fairly spectacular photograph. I've never seen lightning hitting the sea before. Just lucky nobody was bathing at the time, but you know, it was a very, very spectacular photograph indeed. That's it. I hope we get a few more dark nights and we can enjoy the rest of our autumn. Okay, thank you very much.